There's a saying that I think we're all familiar with: ignorance is bliss. It was coined by an 18th century English poet, Thomas Gray. And if you live by this moment, you may not want to listen to this interview. As a good risk management professional, I am very well aware of cyber risks, but I don't think I fully appreciated the critical cyber risks in our nation's infrastructure. Check out this quote from Brian Becker of White Hat Security. Industrial control systems are the wild west of cybersecurity at the moment. These systems control factories, buildings, utilities, etc. Most systems have little to no protection, and best practices are still being adopted very slowly. They also represent extremely high-value targets, especially from a strategic point of view. A few new companies have entered the landscape, but it is still an extremely young industry. Today, I am in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've got this incredible opportunity where I'm sitting down with Rob Lee, the CEO of Dragos. Rob has an incredible resume. Go online, but here are a few fun facts. First of all, like I said, he is the CEO and founder of Dragos. You'll hear more about Dragos in a minute. He was on the Forbes 30 Under 30 for enterprise tech in 2016. He's an author and speaker. In fact, actually, I think he was speaking at a conference today. He spent time in the NSA. That's got to be pretty cool. And he even finds time, which I think he brings out his creativity, to write Little Bobby. Go check it out. It's a weekly cyber tech comment. And I have to say, I love marketing, and it is brilliant for creating awareness and training on this issue. Dragos is a pretty cool startup. It's probably a lot more complicated than what I'm about to say, but I like to simplify things. So here is the problem, and I shared this with you in the stats. There are a lot of cyber threats in industrial networks. And when you think of industrial networks, think of things like energy, manufacturing, water, and there aren't a lot of experienced people or tools to analyze and respond to these threats. Dragos' secret sauce? They have people who have really deep cyber experience in industrial controls. They have a lot of people that have that kind of been there, done that stories, and we're going to be hearing some of those stories hopefully today from Rob. But they also have some cool platforms and technologies to monitor and respond to these threats. So today when I talk to Rob, I'm going to be asking him things like, what is cyber risk in industrial control systems? That's a mouthful. See, I couldn't even get through it. What are some stories to actually make it real? What should leaders be doing to respond to this threat? How is Dragos helping? What has Rob learned about leading through cyber crises? And I'm going to end, like I always do, with some good old leadership questions.
What effectively happened in 2015 in Ukraine is the adversaries broke into those environments, stayed there for 6+ months learning the systems, and then they really just use native functionality in the systems to turn off the power.
Welcome to the Resilient Podcast, where we hear stories from leaders on risk, crisis, and disruption. My name's Mike Kearney. I'm a Deloitte partner based out of beautiful San Francisco, although I don't spend enough time there. But my career has been in strategic risk, brand and reputation. I love innovative new solutions, love creating great experience for clients, and I love what I'm doing here with the podcast, where I get to jump on a plane. Like I said, today I'm in Nashville, and I get to interview these leaders that have so much to say about what it's like to navigate through crisis, risk, and disruption, what it takes to be resilient. And I cannot wait to talk to Rob. And Rob is at the forefront of this industrial control systems cyber risk. And he is going to share us some incredible insights that I think we're all going to benefit from. Hey, Rob, welcome to Resilient.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to start this out with something that doing a little research just blew me away. But you were one of the first people to report about the black energy attack in 2015 in Ukraine. I want to say most people probably don't know a lot about these operational technology or industrial control technology cyber risks. So if you could just kind of start what happened there and maybe make it easy for the person that doesn't really understand a whole lot about it would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to understand is industrial is pretty much the entire world, right? So I think a lot of firms these days look at operation technologies or OT or industrial control systems we call ICS.
Yep.
We look at that and we think power, water, we think manufacturing sites, that's it.
Yep.
But really, pretty much everybody besides banks and insurance companies are industrial companies, like logistic lines, everything out there is industrial. And when you look at it from an IT or enterprise security strategy, a lot of people think about patching vulnerabilities, stopping malware, like how do we protect these networks. What effectively happened in 2015 in Ukraine is the adversaries broke into those environments, stayed there for 6+ months learning the systems, and then they really just use native functionality in the systems to turn off the power.
What does that? What does native functionality mean?
Yeah, it means like the grid operators, like the defenders, like grid operators, are turning off and on power. I mean, they have to keep power and electricity running, right? I mean, so there's just functionality in the systems to be able to open up a circuit breaker or close a circuit breaker or keep the system energized or de-energized. And the adversaries effectively kind of became insiders in knowledge and then just use that functionality that's built into the systems. There's no patch to apply. There's no malware to delete. It's just that's how systems
turned it
work.
off.
Yeah, exactly. They just turned it off. But they did it in a coordinated, targeted way, and they did it across months of time of being in those environments, and that's where the real risk came in of actually being able to do a coordinated effect across multiple regions of Ukraine. So it was 225,000 customers across the regions that had that impact. And the downside is it happened again in 2016, and we've seen adversaries learn from that as well. And that's typically what we don't want to see, is your adversaries getting smarter about how to do these things, because then you see a little bit of a snowball effect,
right?
Where you might see these attacks that have never really occurred start occurring on a more common frequency.
How long was the power out?
And not long at all.
It wasn't, okay.
No, so I think some people look at that and go, oh, it was only out for 6 hours.
Right.
No big deal.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is the systems were destroyed on the what we call the SCADA side of the house. So the systems that effectively help automate it.
Yep.
Those were out for 8+ months.
Wow.
And so that impacts the ability to bill. So there's no ability to make money on your electric power at that point. And also that automation provides an aspect of safety. If you're having to manually operate electric equipment, you are very much in a position to get hurt or killed. And so without your systems in place, you could have loss of life due to these types of events.
So what has happened since then? Do you think like these companies have gotten religion? Like, has there been a significant uptake in protecting yourself against this?
It's I think the community, especially in electric power, doesn't get enough credit. I think they do a lot more than people realize, but it's behind the scenes.
Yep.
But it's still selective. It's not like the industry is doing this. It's maybe your top 20-30% of your power companies are really, really leading the way. Then there's maybe your 40% in kind of the middle that are maybe they're doing the right things, maybe they're not, and then there's the bottom portions which really are just behind. And I think that's what everybody's a little bit uncomfortable with, is especially when you're talking about electric power and United States multiple grids that we have. You kind of want everybody on equal playing foot because you kind of have to protect it all.
And when you were using those percentages, is that in the U.S. or
that would be in the U.S.
That's
globally,
in the U.S.
It's way worse.
Wow.
So
what would I'm sorry, I just got to. So like, if I'm an executive and I knew that this happened, why would I be in that bottom quartile? How do you even stay there? It's hard to get my mind around.
There's so many reasons this happens. I think one is sometimes just even internal cultural issues of board of directors know they want to do something. The executives know they want to do something, but they don't necessarily know what the right investment looks like. And talking between the enterprise security people and what's happening on the operations side of the house, if you don't have the right people along that entire chain, communication issues, culture issues, et cetera, can really break down very quickly. Another issue that comes up is there's a lot of guidance out there for companies. Like if you're an executive of a company and you're trying to figure the right thing to do for security, you are at no lack of people outside trying to tell you, well, you must do these 5 things and you'd be okay, or some projections at the end of the year that if you don't do these predictions, then you're done. And so there's almost a little bit of analysis paralysis that can form for those companies. And then some of them just honestly don't believe it's an issue. I think there was a smaller portion in the U.S., but still existed, of people that looked at that and went, oh, that's Ukraine. Anything to effectively get it out of their minds.
Right. That would never happen in the U.S.,
exactly.
right?
And unfortunately, that's just not the case. I mean, we don't see power outages in the U.S. that have occurred since 2015 due to that. But what we do see is nation-state operators like absolutely targeting sites. I mean, my firm does a significant amount of incident response around the community, and seeing targeted attacks and targeted intrusions by adversaries. And we go in power, manufacturing, all these different sites and kick out these state actors. And it's not exactly as nice as people would like it. I commonly tell people the threat is I say the risk is much higher than people realize, but not as bad as they want to imagine. Like, you don't need to go read Ted Koppel's book and like build a bunker.
Right.
But on the other side of the house, we got to be doing a lot more than we're currently doing.
Maybe just touch on a couple. So we talked about the energy industry. What other industries? You said it. Everyone is susceptible, but what would be the top few others that you would?
So I generally, when I think of the industries that really need to do a lot more because we have the risk and we have seen threats that we can learn from.
Yep.
I place it in kind of electric power and all the different players across electric power, transmission, generation, distribution, renewables, et cetera. I think of oil and gas, even though there's a lot of different aspects of oil and gas. And although it's not fair to clump them all together, I say manufacturing is kind of a larger industry. There's absolutely differences between chemical manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, food and beverage, et cetera. But as a manufacturing industry, a lot of the threats and issues they see are actually kind of similar. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that can happen in those other industries where electric power gets a lot of discussion because we think of state-on-state kind of conflict.
Yep.
But the types of things that you can actually do in the other environments are more numerous in its benefit to the adversary. As an example, targeting electric power is effectively a military-like action. I'm going to war or I'm not, or I'm scaring politicians or I'm not.
Right.
But if I target a pharmaceutical plant, it could have the same type of conflict-like scenarios, but I could also steal tons of intellectual property worth billions as it relates to all sorts of new medicine and research being done. Same thing in food and beverage. We worked with this one's a little bit weird. We worked with a company that produces lots of chocolate, and they were having intellectual property theft issues, and it had nothing to do with the recipe of chocolate.
Right.
It had to do with the molds. And they were doing lots of research around what molds would sell and not sell well, and they had a state actor stealing the intellectual property of those molds and publishing them or building them first in another country and stealing sort of revenues. It's amazing how much happens in the industrial world that people just don't realize.
They just don't realize. Yeah.
Yep.
So Rob, let's maybe go back a few years and learn a bit about you. You grew up in a military family, but just tell us what your early years were like.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Alabama. And my mom and dad were senior master sergeants in the Air Force, so enlisted family growing up. A lot of fun, but I really wasn't a computer nerd to sort of start off with. I mean, I loved games and playing around, but I think being in Alabama was a little bit more about creeks and running around outside and being a happy little redneck. Basically, there's no great story on this. It's effectively my dad tricked me. But I was going to Auburn. I was going to have a fun time at Auburn University and go party and enjoy life. My dad had said something to me along the lines of, well, you couldn't get into the Air Force Academy anyways. I'm like, what's the Air Force Academy, Dad?
That's like the Jedi mind trick.
He totally screwed with me. And so I applied to this thing not knowing anything about it. And my dad was a Purple Heart winner and earner in Vietnam. And so he had an automatic nomination. You couldn't get in automatically, but you could guarantee that a congressman would look at you effectively. And so then we put my package in, and I got accepted. And so I go to this school thinking it's like a normal school. Yeah, it was interesting, but I was too stubborn to quit. And then on summers, they would send you off, and you could go do a variety of things. And my summers, I would get to do cool little missions, and routinely would be one that was working in Cameroon, and you'd do control system building and trying to do a little microeconomy building. And so I went to Cameroon and helped play around with wind turbines and water filtration units and things like that. And so I learned about control systems before I really learned about cybersecurity.
Interesting.
And I was just really impressed with how much control systems operated everything around the world around us, but nobody knew about them. Everything from elevators in the building to things in your car to satellites. I mean, it was everywhere. And you'd ask anybody about controls, everything.
Yeah.
And at that time, everyone was like, what are you talking about? These, gremlins in the system.
Right.
So I graduated, and they said, hey, at the end, I mean, I wasn't a perfect student by any stretch, but at the end, they had one last pilot slot open up. They're like, do you want to be a pilot? I was like, no. They're like, what? They effectively hated me at that point. They're like, well, you go be a comm officer then, which was kind of like the talk down to you. Well, you go be a comm officer.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go back to Africa. So my actual major at the academy was African studies. And I was like, I'm going to go back to Africa and do control system work. And I get to this news. En route, they changed comm to cyber, and they went to this brand new schoolhouse they had. They're like, well, all right, you're a cyber officer now. And I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, we don't know. And so we're doing all this training and work, and it was pretty in-depth kind of work and training. And then they said, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, what about all these control systems? They're like, what are you talking about? And so for months, I was actually teaching them about control systems. And at the very end, they said, you did really well. You get one of your top picks coming out of here. Definitely not top of the class, but one of the top picks coming out of here is the White House, or some podunk assignment in Germany. I was like, okay, I'll go to Germany. They're like, no, the White House. You do like security.
Wait,
in the White House.
You like the pilot? No. White House? No. I think there's a trend here.
Yeah. It basically, I accidentally walked in. I'm sure I'm like restoring any credibility I have in this space. But they're like, you can go to the White House and it'll be good for your career. And I'm like, but you said Germany. I'm from Alabama. I'm going to go get drunk in Germany. Yeah, like this is.
I'm going back to my Auburn days.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm going to finally get the experience. Yeah. And then when I got there, it ended up being like a cover site for the NSA. And I'm like, oh, okay. What do you want me to do? And they're like, what are you? And I'm like, cyber officer. They're like, oh. Okay, find threats. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? They're like, find the unknown unknowns. I'm like, what are the unknown unknowns? They're like, we don't know. Go find them.
That's why we're asking you to do it.
And so I like accidentally fell backwards into building one of the first industrial control system focused NSA missions around threat discovery. So the National Security Agency had been securing ICS before and like working on that, but there hadn't previously been a mission to find what threats were breaking in and learn about them and kind of this intelligence work around these threats. And I don't think anybody thought there was going to be any. Yeah. And we just started finding states and actors and people that we never heard of before.
And what just put a timestamp on this. When was
this was late in the ages. So this was like 2010, 2011.
Oh, wow.
So this wasn't like that long ago.
Yeah.
The world of industrial security has been kind of blooming for a while. But this idea of threats to industrial security and like actually learning from the threats to do things hasn't. I mean, I would say at most companies I go to, if they have an industrial security strategy, they just copy and paste whatever the enterprise security strategy is and then just put whatever doesn't break the industrial environment into the industrial environment. And so effectively you're taking a security strategy that was built off of different threats, different missions, different systems, and you're applying it hoping it's going to reduce risk, but obviously it's not because it's not the same risk.
Right.
And so that whole aspect of, hey, let's take an intelligence-driven approach, let's learn from the threats is completely new in this space.
So somebody referred to you as somebody with marrow deep concern for protecting your homeland.
Yeah, I would say anybody's. And so I think that's, I sometimes probably upset some people in this comment, but I think nobody should be in anybody else's civilian industrial infrastructure. Like I loved my time at the National Security Agency, don't get me wrong. But if I found the National Security Agency and somebody else's ICS, I'd report it. Like nobody should be in anybody else's civilian industrial.
So it's not necessarily the homeland per se. It's just get out of there. But yes.
Like I don't get me wrong. You cut me deep enough, I'll bleed red, white, and blue. I'm sure. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I'd protect the Iranian power grid if they let me. Right? Like if it's civilians, it deserves to be protected worldwide.
Yep. So you've seen obviously some crazy stuff. What keeps you up at night now?
Oh yeah. So. Like there's
or anything.
All
maybe you sleep like a baby, but
I enjoy life. But I've got a 9-month-old son. Life's amazing. But look, there's all sorts of disaster scenarios that go wrong. There's intellectual property theft. There's all these big ones. But you know what really concerns me is the fear of it all. I see all these people hyping up the threats. And there are real threats, and we must do real things against them. But we don't need to freak out on every little phishing email or something we get. You know, like. We have to really approach this with some poise and nuance.
Right.
And what I'm concerned about is Congress, Senate, national level leaders around the world are so terrified of what can be done. You can prepare the biggest military, the biggest economy, everything. And the idea that somebody remotely can turn off the lights scares everybody. And when I did my testimony to the Senate, it was probably the one time that I just felt like the most patriotic ever, like testifying in the Senate. Like, it was a very cool feeling. And their questions, you could still feel the tenseness. They were really, really concerned. And my biggest fear is something happens that's really honestly controllable, like maybe a 30-minute power outage in D.C.
And people overreact.
Yeah.
So the overreaction.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Because I work in Deloitte. I'm a risk partner, not a cyber person. I know a lot about IT cyber. The OT piece is kind of new. Mm-hmm. So I would say even I'm kind of nascent in this area. What do you see in terms of people understanding of this? First question. And then how do you get business leaders actually to pay attention?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get business leaders even to pay attention to traditional cyber risks. It's getting better, but...
It's getting better, and it really is. But I think... In my short tenure, what I've seen change the most across the cyber risk discussion at all is having business leaders that have technical backgrounds
Yep.
has been helping companies significantly. So having somebody that we think was a good business leader because they had an MBA,
Right.
and then you put them in, but they don't understand anything about tech, they're not really good at advocating for what needs to be done.
Got it.
And I see that changing a lot. Like I see the generation of people that are cybersecurity practitioners that learned the business, because you can't just be a tech practitioner. You really do
Right.
have to learn the business.
Right.
And we're starting to see those move into those positions, and I think that's changing a lot for companies. And getting the right outside help to validate that can obviously help a lot. I not just to have a plug, but I'm pretty pro Deloitte on that piece. On the OT side of the house, like the industrial side of the house, I think there has to be an understanding that the customer of what you're doing, as well as just the entire mission, is the operations. That's where you generate all the business for your company.
Right.
And what I found effective at a board level, and I've had the pleasure of going into about 10 or so boards this past year at different companies and speaking about industrial threats. And what I found to be really effective is helping them understand that a lot of the resource investment has been on the enterprise side of the house,
Right.
but actually most of their risk is on the industrial side of the house. And so they just step back for a second and realize the world's kind of flipped. They go, wow, we've been putting a lot of resources, but all the money we make is over on this other side of the house. And what do you mean we're not doing anything? And so it flips a little for them, and then you help them understand, but hold on, you don't need to do everything you've been doing. Every IT thing, every IT strategy, every IT product, you don't have to just copy and paste. You don't have to find the equivalent. With a small focused effort of some smart people, the right tools, right technology, process, and people,
Yep.
you can make huge strides to reduce that risk. That kind of sets them back on even footing of, oh, okay, we can do this. And I think there's something that happens, and especially around cybersecurity, where you can feel helpless really quickly. Like, oh, state actors. Oh, what if China or Russia or Iran? It's like, you're not going up against China or Russia or Iran. You're going up against somebody whose first-time job is the government, and they're between the ages of 18 and 30, and they have PowerPoint and management too, right? Like you're going up against human adversaries.
Right.
You can do this. And I think that honestly works a lot for
But
them.
it sounds like in order to really help just a business person without maybe a technical background, almost equating it to this is how your business is running. You have not made investments in this area.
Oh, I think it's an enlightening thing to see. Like, what do you mean I have unrealized risk across
Right.
my entire company?
And so it sounds like it hasn't been that difficult for you to convey that message to them when you've communicated.
No, not at all.
If you were, though, giving advice to a CISO or CIO to make that communication simple, what 2 or 3 things would you say to them?
Yeah, so if a CIO or CSO is trying to talk to their executives, board, plant manager, et cetera, I do think it's effective strategy to simply articulate we have unappreciated, unrealized risk for the company, and look at the budget we have and just show them how little
Where
you've
you're
actually
spending
been
the
putting
money.
on industrial.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Follow the money, show them we haven't been doing anything on it, we should do this. And the most effective tool I've seen to be kind of an eye-opener, which is a really in-depth thing, it's not super simple, but a tabletop kind of exercise at the board level of showing them of would you even be able to answer the questions that you need answered from everything from regulatory or liability or communications or just a general risk perspective? Could you even have the tools, people, and processes to go and bring the plant back up from a cybersecurity incident? Walking through kind of the what-if scenarios, not based on hypotheticals, but based on what other companies have actually dealt with, ends up being probably the most effective tool I see in changing the culture.
Well, and the likelihood of them having tested that before is probably very low.
It's never.
So
Every company we go to has like an incident response plan.
Right.
And if there's an industrial portion of it, I would say in well over 90% of the companies that we go to, which is, think about it, they're the ones that are mature enough to call us. So it's kind of a sampling bias in itself. But well over 90% of those, if they have industrial at all in their incident response plan, it's like a paragraph or a page of talk to the plant managers. And they're like, what are you talking to us for? Like, we don't know what you're supposed to do with the security piece of this. So, no, I think companies are more unprepared than they might realize.
So talk to us about Dragos, obviously your baby now.
It's been fun.
So tell us, like, if people don't know about Dragos, what do you guys do?
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing to understand about Dragos is we're the team that knows about the threats the most. And so we're the team that can help you deal with the threats from a technology and people way. What It sounds kind of arrogant saying out loud, but we have the practitioners. There's not a ton of people in the industrial security community. I mean, it's well known that we're talking about in the hundreds, not in tens of thousands of people, right? And we've sort of centralized that talent. And so I think the thing that we did well to start with, which actually infuriated like all the venture capital community and everybody else, like, what do you mean you're going to hire like people? Like, no, I want to outsource whatever and let's build product. Like, no, I'm going to centralize the smart people. And so we hired a bunch of practitioners and effectively do three things at the company. We have an intel team, so they go out and figure out what the threats are actually doing and how they're doing it. We have a services team that does things like incident response around the world. And then we as a company are a software company. But I believe you make better software by having better people. I think we have an issue in our community now where everyone wants to say, oh, artificial intelligence and neural networks and machine learning, we can machine learning this away. And I'm like, no, that machine learning model has never experienced this.
Right.
Let's use machine learning and really smart technologies as an amplification of smart people, but let's not pretend that you can remove smart people from the process. So let me take the insights that the experts have and make better software, and then, go after that and do whatever you want to amplify it.
Anything you're innovating now that you're excited about?
Well, I mean, I think
you can even share.
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology we have is cool because it's not only giving visibility into the assets and inventory around the environment. It's kind of fun to see people's face light up when they've never seen how much has been in those environments. They assume, we have a couple turbines and a couple manufacturing lines, whatever, and you turn it on and there's all these devices and they're like, what is that? And I'm like, yeah, it's been here, man. Or it's very common for companies to think they're air gapped.
Right.
Very, very common. Oh, we're segmented from the internet. No, you're not. Guaranteed. I'll save you the assessment. You're not segmented. And they start seeing these interconnections. Like, where do those connections come from?
What would lead them to believe that they are? I've never heard that term air gap, and I'm guessing that's separated from the internet.
Yeah, so I think it's a very common thing that just everybody in the communities. I don't know where it originally came from.
Yep.
And people even talk about, well, there's IT and OT convergence. It's converging together. No, it's not. That happened a decade ago. Like, you're just now figuring it out, but it already occurred. You've got cloud-based applications reaching down to your manufacturing lines today. You've got internet-connected, processing that's helping you produce power more efficiently. You have a highly connected plant, highly connected industrial
And they just don't. Is it that they don't? They literally just don't realize it.
Because I mean, if you think about it, there's so many things happening in that environment: maintenance, operators. I mean, in an enterprise environment, you have vendors, but you don't have vendors that you really rely on. Like you have like Microsoft for Windows, but it's not like your entire system is built by somebody. Maybe like ERP would be equivalent, but the industrial environment, they build your portion of the plant. And so as you have all these different equipment manufacturers building giant portions of it, more and more they've been connecting up over the years for maintenance and purposes, and people have been signing off to go, I want to reduce that cost. And, and it just happened to people, and they didn't realize it. So from a technology piece, what I get excited about is, one, turning it on and people are like, wow, all right. And two, is that's when we then start doing like the threat detection piece, which is let's show you that you have issues. And it's kind of, and I don't want to say this flippantly, but it's a little bit like shooting fish in a barrel of, you have an environment that you've never really done much with before. It's a pretty high chance that some stuff is going to be in there. It may not be the Russian nation state, right? But you're going to have something going on.
Yep.
So helping them realize that things have already been occurring and you can kind of get a quick win right off the bat, it's always nice. And then we have in the technology like playbooks. And I think that's the piece that I think is the most fun, which is I don't want to make a technology that solves the problem. Like, I don't think that's really possible. There's no silver bullet.
Right.
What I want to do is enable people to develop their own experience and expertise. So instead of trying to sell a silver bullet, it's really just checklists and info for my people of, here's how we would have dealt with this situation. Why don't you do it? And so it's kind of this guided experience for your security people to then go actually do it themselves. And then they feel super proud and they're excited. You see the light bulb come on. So you're kind of growing the community at the same time that you're actually getting them to do the work. That's all fun. And then it's always just fun being involved in these cases where I think we're a little bit different than most firms where we don't want to talk about the attacks. So
I was going to ask you about that. Why is that? So I read that somewhere and I was like, wait, so that insinuates that other firms like to talk about the attacks.
Yeah, I think we're kind of pseudo-famous, if you will, for two things. One, we don't tell the media about the incidents, and two, we don't do attribution, even if we can. Like, even if we know who did the attack, we don't do it. And journalists, used to the mindset was journalists wouldn't cover you unless you were willing to point the finger to like Russia, China,
Right.
whatever. And so we were one of the few firms that were like, yeah, we're not doing that.
What? Why?
It doesn't help it doesn't help anybody.
Right.
And so if I tell
So
you,
it's almost more of just bringing awareness to how great you guys are,
yeah,
more than anything.
More than it's like if I tell you it's Russia or China or Iran or North Korea or whatever else, it's distracting.
Right.
It doesn't actually help you do your job better. And you can argue about, oh, it helps with priorities. No, it doesn't. Like it's legitimately distracting the people doing the mission of actually defending. You should care about how the attack occurred and how to defend against it, not who did it. And so I think it's been very self-serving in the industry to like do all this attribution stuff. So we don't do it. And it's been interesting because originally we thought it was going to be a decision that hurt us. And then the journalists were like, wow, these people don't do it. It kind of became a thing. And there was even a Washington Post article about us lately. They were like, Dragos, who famously doesn't do attribution. I just kind of like laughed at that. So we don't do that, and we don't talk about our cases. And I think for most firms you do. Like you want to.
Meaning like here's work we did.
Yeah,
Like case
exactly.
studies. Like when you.
Yeah. Like if it's an incident.
Yeah, when you're a consultant, man, that's like what
everything.
you live on, right?
Oh,
like,
absolutely. Yeah. Like that's how you prove that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And in most firms, it's really important to be in the New York Times or Washington
Right.
Post, whatever else we're talking about. We just did this big investigation, and we refuse to talk about something unless it's already going to be made public somewhere else first. And the reason for that is if you're a power company, manufacturer, whatever else, the last thing you want is this stuff in the media because people freak out about it. Everybody cares about our industrial infrastructure, right? Your local community cares about power.
Right.
It's our infrastructure.
Right.
And so when these attacks get publicized, it generates so much noise and hype and craziness that none of the defenders ever get to do the job. They're just answering emails and taskers from everybody.
That's a fair point.
And so it's kind of I view it as our responsibility to help them do the actual mission. And we've actually found stories that we're going to get out that we killed to make sure they didn't get out, just so that people could actually do the job.
Where does that philosophy come from, do you think? Is it kind of your own value system or something else?
I don't know. I think it's maybe that's a good question. Maybe there's an element to like the National Security Agency of like don't talk about it.
Yep.
I mean, the only reason we even talk about the National Security Agency stuff is because so much stuff got leaked and my name ended up being tied to some stuff with Russian websites and all this other crap. And I was like, well, all right, it's in
the press.
It's in the press now.
Yeah.
It's not like I can come out and be like, that didn't exist. But I think that came from the like almost. I think there's maybe there's a little arrogance in it too. Like if we really want to get down to it, I think from a national security agency perspective, like you took pride in being like that silent defender of like I'm holding the wall, but nobody needs to know, and I can't even tell my spouse about it. Like there's almost a little like I don't know romanticism to it. And so the idea that like you're this community partner and taking care of people and I don't need the credit. Like maybe there's a little arrogance, but I think it also comes down to by being practitioners, by actually being in the community, you realize how much it hurts the community. And if you actually want to make these companies successful, then even if you think the ends justify the means, you just don't.
So talk about talent. So you said that there's not hundreds of thousands or even thousands of people with this experience. What are you guys doing, or what does the industry need to do to cultivate more people?
So there's a couple ways I look at that problem. One, even before I started the company, but when I saw this problem at the agency, I had this ICS mission that was growing, and because it was successful, the government kept throwing money at it, like let's build it out more, and there was nobody to hire. There was nobody to pull over, and what I found most successful is building internal training classes and just like brainwashing them into our way of thinking about it. And at the time, I realized that didn't scale. Yep. And what happens if I get hit by a bus? Right. How am I going to make that scalable? So I actually ended up going and creating the first ICS instant response class at the SANS Institute. And so it's like a big training provider around the world. And so to this day, I still teach. I mean, that's where I came from today was teaching there. And so even though I'm running Dragos, I still think it's important for the community for me to get out and teach a couple times a year to try to at least build up this skill set. Training alone is not going to do it. You got to get experience as well. But I think what's important for the community is having access to training and also creating a buzz around it. I think there's a lot of interest in cybersecurity, but there's an importance to show that ICS security is this cool, defensible, wonderful thing to be in, and then you draw in new people. So we, like at Dragos, we've had success in three ways. One, is pulling in the small community that does exist around ICS security practitioners. And we all used to get, drunk at the conferences together and go, what if we all just did a company together? Like what if we just got like the 20 of us and just forget consulting? What if we just did it together? And like we always used to joke about that. But that's what we did.
What you did.
I mean, we just pulled all the friends together, which helped in the startup aspect of, reduce the norming aspect. We've known each other for years.
Right.
The second thing we did when we exhausted that talent pool was we looked at really high-end, really professional IT security folks that had the community drive. You could see that they were always out teaching. They were always out speaking at conferences and B-sides and whatever else. You're like, all right, not only is that person sharp, but they really care about community, and that's a very industrial like thing. I don't want to say enterprise security doesn't care about community, but I mean that's a very industrial thing. And so we'd pull those people in, and we'd make them junior people at our firm. Say, I'm glad you were a top-tier incident responder everywhere else, but here you're going to side saddle with our people, and we treat it like a journeyman program, and then transfer that knowledge. I mean, we've been very successful at that. To give her a lot of kudos, like Leslie Carhart's a well-known incident responder in the community, and thankfully she didn't murder us for doing this. We treated her like a junior person, and she came in, and now she's amazing. Like she's probably one of the best ICS incident responders in the community now because she transferred those skills over, was humble about it, and then went off and did amazing things. And then the last thing we do is we take just straight up like interns and young people. And right out of college, they haven't been taught the wrong things.
Does it matter what their background is?
I
So
don't
like
care.
if I'm a kid, in college.
I want somebody who's excited, who's hungry, who, if I can sit them down in front of the TV show how it's made and their face lights up, that's your person.
Yeah.
And we take those folks. One of our better analysts was at the Navy Academy, and everybody makes wrong choices in life, right? He was the Navy guy instead, and it's unfortunate for him. But no, he was a Naval Academy person, and they kicked him out for having diabetes, which
They didn't know that when he went in?
didn't know it when he went in.
Yeah.
And you can actually be an officer in the Navy and have diabetes, but you just can't graduate from Annapolis and have diabetes. So whatever. We were pretty pissed for him. And we didn't know this kid, but he started showing up one day and said, hey, can I just like do some work around the office while I pack up my things, set all my stuff with you, so I'm going to go home. Like, yeah, sure, no problem. And he just dove into it so much that I walked in one day and found him sleeping on the couch so he could be there early enough in the morning to side saddle with the analyst to be able to go do stuff. I'm like, dude, you're hired. Like, stop, go home, like, sleep. And he's one of our better analysts now. He's so entrenched in it that he's become amazing.
You know what's great about that story is it's actually a great little lesson learned for kids trying to find a job. Like when you have that grit and just, I'm going to make this happen. Those are the type of people we all want to work with.
Yeah, I think you can get burned out in this industry really quickly, but I think you have to show you're hungry.
Yeah.
And the balance is it's a really thin line to walk, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to come in when the bar is kind of stacked ahead of you any time of going into places like power generation stations and gas turbines and oil refineries. It's not exactly like you're if you crash a Windows system, everything's okay. Like you're taking some real responsibility, and so you really got to prove it.
Right.
And we found that a lot of the young kids coming out, they're really showing some awesome aptitude.
How do you think your intelligence background helped you?
I think it helped us a ton. And the reason I say that is we're the only ones that are actually doing what we're doing, and I still think this is the next arrogant comment I'm going to make. I think we're years ahead of our competition because of that.
Yeah.
They're all buying into this narrative of let's just bake a machine learning model and it'll highlight anomalies. It's like, then what? What do you mean then what? When you have something weird on the network, now what are you going to do about it? For us, we dealt firsthand with these attacks. I mean, name your major industrial attack and somebody at Dragos has worked on it. And that shows us like, well, hey, that doesn't act. Here's what does and doesn't work in these situations. And the intelligence side of it helped us go, okay, it's nice to get an alert, a notification that something's wrong. It's even better to have context around why it's wrong, context of what you're supposed to do with it, an understanding of where it's happened before. And that understanding of what intelligence can deliver, I still think is an issue, even in enterprise security.
Yep.
Most people think of intelligence as a data feed of data that gets delivered to you. That's not intelligence.
Right.
Intelligence is context and understanding and knowledge about what you're supposed to do in any given situation. And I mean, we built that mission out for industrial, so it didn't even exist before. So I think we're I think we've kind of set up a little bit of a monopoly on that component of the industry. And so it's done very well for us, and we've grown very quickly. I mean, we started the year with 22 people. We have 104 employees now.
I was going to ask.
I mean,
So that's
it's crazy.
I wasn't even going to go there. Are you concerned? Is probably not the right word, but you obviously have significant growth opportunity. You're the CEO. How are you managing that? That's got to be
culture. And I know that every CEO says that, but like I've awoken to that of yep, that's right. I think every time I've like heard some business person be like, it's about the culture. Like, okay, dude, like what is it really? What are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis? Nope.
So what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
So from a day-to-day basis, effectively, it kind of have like three different companies in the company, right? You have an intelligence team that's off and doing their own thing. You have a services team that's off doing their own thing. You have a product team. Just keeping those three in line is enough that I focus a lot on what are we capturing from each for the voice of the customer.
Yep.
Since I've been in the community a long time and like teaching them, I kind of have almost like this product officer kind of view on what the normal user needs out of what we're doing. And then, as silly as it might sound, but from a marketing and sales perspective, we're a highly technical practitioner shop. Like we're always oversensitive to snake oil marketing and sales tactics. You know, we've all lived that. If somebody came in and sold the CEO on a silver bullet and we had to live with it, you know, like, and so it is a daily work. Luckily I have a good sales and marketing leader, but it's a daily struggle, like working with them to help them understand, all right, well, here's what you can't say. What do you mean I can't say that word? Well, no, this word has been abused before and here's why. And so it's, I know it seems kind of silly, but
no, that doesn't at all.
Really focusing on how we communicate to people externally, how we capture communication internally, what values we really focus on, what we walk away from, has been interesting.
That probably says more about your values than anything, right?
There are companies that we go to and like we're not the right fit for where you are. You need to start somewhere else. Usually, you need to go get a handle on your networks. You need to go build a security culture. You know, we're who you come to in maybe 2 to 3 years after you're thinking about this for some of them. And so I think it's important to know what we're good at, because more important than anything, and maybe again goes to maybe a theme of arrogance, but more important than anything to me is like the Dragos brand, that is trusted and people know that we'll take care of them.
Right.
And so I don't want to be in a position where we're not going to be able to be the best in that situation. So. And it's funny too, because I'll tell people that we have like 100 people, and we'll have these giant firms sometimes in the world that we deal with, and they're like, "Oh, that's a small company." I'm like, "We're the largest ICS incident response team in the world. We have more incident responders at Dragos for ICS than the Department of Homeland Security." You know, it's like it's a think scale in terms of what the industrial community is. Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's funny because I always think of, and it's kind of maybe cheeky, but, you know, Tony Hsieh at Zappos, how he sold his first company because he hated his culture, which I think is fascinating. Like where
really
you build your own company and then you hate it.
Yeah, and I don't want to be in that position.
That's a good position
I think
not to be
you
in.
you can only do it once, though.
There is a trend almost starting with where you went to school and then what job you picked and then when you went to Germany. Like you almost do exactly the opposite, but it's actually in some regards it's made you who you are today.
Maybe I chased beer and didn't like flying, so good job, maybe.
Yeah. Hopefully my 19-year-old son's not listening to that. Well, I'm teasing. So just to cap off this conversation, if I'm a business leader, no technology background, what advice would you give to me based on everything that you've said?
Yeah, so understand, like look to see if you have industrial in your company.
Which you basically probably
almost
do.
Guaranteed you do. Make sure you're getting the right answers internal to your company.
Yeah.
Because it's a very difficult position to be in for people that have never dealt with it before, and now they're on the hook to provide answers. But make a culture. If you're an executive, make a culture where you can go to your CIO, your VP of technology, whatever it is, and let them understand that if they don't have an answer for industrial, it's okay. You're not going to penalize them for not having an answer to a complex challenge you as a company has never looked at before. Take the time to get it right. And my general advice is don't worry about all the hypotheticals. I think it's very common for people in security to look at research that comes out of like the DEF CON and Black Hat conferences and stuff and go, well, how would we deal with this? Well, hold on, stop. What has actually happened before?
Right.
Did Ukraine have a cyber attack that led to a power grid? How did those things occur? We want to know at a board level that we can reduce risk against what's real and has occurred before, and help me understand where we can prevent, detect, and respond. Because don't put everything in prevention, but where we can prevent, detect, and respond to those types of incidents. Make sure we're good for that. Because effectively, and I've said this at board before, if the Russian state, and we just pick on Russia all these days, but if the Russian state throws everything they have at you. And it's not, I mean, that's never how it actually is. But let's say they just throw everything they have at you, and it's all novel, and no one's ever seen this before. Like, no one's going to hold the board accountable for that.
Right.
But if what happened last year to a similar company identically happens to you, like, you should probably go to jail. Like, you know, you've definitely not done your job to reduce the risk. So, in essence, start by building the culture around accepting new thoughts of how this needs to be done. Learn from what's happened in the community before to guide your security investments of what right looks like. Then start thinking about being innovative and how you can cover down future issues.
I also just love how, because there's probably a lot of organizations that haven't thought about this, don't go yell or implicate your CIO because they haven't done anything, work with them, which I think is a really healthy way of approaching it.
It's a hard job to be CIO, CSO these days. I mean, CSOs are like scapegoats in every breach we see. When the CSO doesn't own the risk, the CSO is the advisor in the organization. Right. And I think many times they get beat up, and it's kind of funny because they're the ones that are like jumping up and down before of like, we need to look at this.
I know.
Like, and then you see them, leave.
High risk, low reward job.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we've got a lot of insight into this. We're going to pivot to kind of some leadership questions, but I think we've got a lot of insight into who you are. But how would you describe your leadership style?
I try to empower my team as much as possible to make decisions without me. I sleep better knowing that if I get hit by a bus, they can keep the company going and they wouldn't miss a beat. They probably wouldn't like to deal with venture capitalists as much as I have to, but they could do the rest of it, right? And so that comes down from everything from lack of meetings. Like, we try very hard not to have meetings around, give me an update with PowerPoints. Like, I don't care. Like, go do what you need to do. Come to me for help. And it comes down to even like hiring. Like,
I was going to say the lack of meetings, the need to kind of micromanage probably is made a lot easier if you have great people.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if you can't trust your people, then maybe you don't need to be going with that team into the game anyways, you know? But even from like hiring, I think it probably is counterculture where the idea is like, oh, I'm a good CEO because I've met every person we've hired. I completely believe the opposite. I want my team leads to build their own teams, just like I got to build my team with them.
Yep.
And so I am not bothered at all if I don't interview or talk to that person coming in. Now, I'm going to make them feel welcome when they come in and make sure I interact with them and all. But I'd rather my team leads choose the team they're going to go play with.
Yep.
And so I try to empower my team to make as many decisions as possible. We have a company handbook, and we literally have one corporate policy. And that one corporate policy is don't be an asshole. And as long as you stay inside that guideline, because we all know what an asshole is when you look at him, right? As long as you stay inside that line, I don't care. Well, what, I my flight got delayed, and how can I get a hotel? I don't care, dude. Go do what you need to do.
Do what you need to do.
I'm going on a long flight, a 20-hour flight. Going to upgrade to business class. Like, yeah, that makes total sense, dude. Just do what you need to do.
Right.
But don't be a jerk, right? Like, there's a balance there. And I like that. I tell you what, probably the thing I like the most, and this is going to be inappropriate, but the thing I like the most is coming from a government background. It took an act of God to fire somebody. And everybody knows we don't deal with assholes, no matter how good they are.
Right.
And there was an employee that we had that broke that rule and effectively harassed one of our female employees. And she was so nice and followed up with him and said, hey, could you please stop? And then he immediately did it again because he thought it was funny, and he was fired 2 hours later. And like, the ability to have that flexibility inside the company made me feel better. But what I didn't anticipate is it resonated with everybody else.
Oh.
And just culture was amazing after those kind of cases.
I was going to say, if there was a culture score, it probably went up 20% after that.
It all comes down to, I've built the team of people I trust. I think I'm a decently intelligent person enough to hire people smarter than me. And then I let them go do the same thing after that.
But I think you said something that's really important, because one would argue, though, in your industry that the premium on technical skills probably outweighs maybe those interpersonal skills. And I think what you're saying is
no way.
No, they both have to be there.
You better, especially for the type of work we're talking about. I mean, our tagline is arrogant. Like, our tagline is safeguarding civilization. You can't come to play with that and have jerks on your team. Like, you've got to actually take care of the community.
Right. So what's it like dealing with, you're a venture-backed startup, so what's it like dealing with your investors? And I'm guessing there's probably a lot of positive, because they're very focused from a business perspective.
I'm sure it's...
Tell us how that's going.
I'm sure this is going to sound so fake. You're like, oh, I love my venture capitalist. But like of course you do, right?
Yeah.
But
So let me pivot to people. So obviously you've talked a bit about what you do to get your people excited, to encourage them, for you to build the right culture. But what is the one thing you do to motivate them? So that's the first question.
oh, that's good.
And then the second one is, what do you do what do you not do that would demotivate them, which actually may be more important in some regards?
I'm going to give very tactical level answers to that. But what I do to motivate my people is realize why they joined and empower them in all the ways possible to let them do that. And that is the mission. So I remove as much as possible from any barrier for my people so they can focus on the mission. How we do benefits. This is like totally not normal startup stuff, but we do a 6%, 100% match 401k. We do health, dental, life, disability, vision, everything 100% covered for you and all your dependents. Don't worry about anything. We got you. Every possible thing we do, provide lunches for people, like every possible thing we do to take every minute back that we can give them to do the mission, and we let them go do it. And they recruit for us. Like, we don't have a recruiting problem. We put out a job announcement one time. We had 480 applicants in 48 hours. Like, we don't have a recruitment problem.
What about, beyond that, it almost sounds like you also take away kind of the bureaucracy. Is there like an example that you see in a lot of organizations where you said, we are not doing that here? Meetings was
that
one
can't
of.
Do the mission. I do not agree, and this is a very
that I'm not
management that can't do the mission they're leading. I know this is maybe not resonate with everybody in the audience, and I understand that I'm a small company, but the idea that I can put a person and expect management to be a skill is ridiculous to me. There's no such thing as management as a skill. Read all the books, Peter Thiel's book and all this other crap. They all boil down to don't be an asshole, right? So that's why we just made it our company policy. I don't view management as a skill. I view being so good in your position that you can coach and lead others as the skill.
As a skill.
So my vice president of services can go do the incident response case, so he can lead that team.
Yep.
My vice president of marketing, she gets every aspect of it, so she can lead that team. And so one of the things we're really careful of, and one of the things that we really try to avoid, is nobody gets a pass of, well, they're really good at this business thing or whatever else, so we'll put them there even though they might not be good at that. No, they have to be able to do what their people are doing.
That is fascinating. What about advice for an up-and-comer? So, if you were to go back to when you're in the Air Force Academy, you put yourself in the situation of a kid that's in college, what advice would you give to that individual, irrespective if they're going to go into cyber or not?
Yeah, I think there's no excuse to not be empowered in your journey. And what I mean by that is, regardless of the technical skill you want to develop, even if it's not cybersecurity.
Yep.
So I don't know that I could give completely broad advice, but especially in the world of tech-ish anything, there's so many online resources and free resources and everything else that you can self-educate on so many wide topics. Harvard has free online classes. MIT has free online classes. I really don't I don't think everybody starts from the same position of privilege in life to be able to actually go do anything.
Yep.
But to actually teach yourself to be able to do those things is a different discussion. And if you are afforded the luxury of a nice life where you could go home and check out Netflix and hang out for a couple hours, and you come in the job interview and you don't know a technical skill, but you're like, but I hope you can teach me. Why didn't you teach yourself? Did you have the opportunity? If not, that's different.
Right.
But if you had the opportunity and didn't take it, why do you want to do it on my dime? I completely agree with taking your people and training them and whatever else. But if you're a young person and you want to get into this field, you better show that you are able to take advantage of your own path, that you're able to actually take care of yourself. Then we'll amplify it.
Right.
Then we can unlock the gates for you. But you've got to actually show you can get after it.
Hustle.
Yep.
And it's be ready. I totally agree with you. So I've been dying to get to this because I think it is so fascinating. I'm curious why you started Little Bobby.
Oh gosh.
and the book that preceded it. And what I'm really curious of is what inspired you, but I also think that there's potentially some creative genius there, maybe not, but of explaining really complex topics in a way that people could get.
Yeah, so I'm afraid that the story is not going to be the setting the expectations of you think it's an intelligent story, but
Maybe explain what Little
yeah.
Bobby is first.
Yeah, so Little Bobby is a comic I run every week. Every Sunday, Jeff Haas and I do this. Jeff Haas illustrates it, and I write it. And it's a 3-pane comic explaining like some complex security topic, or a lot of times a fair amount of snark or something about.
It was like
the
somebody
topic.
said, I think I read Calvin and the Hobbes was your inspiration.
We actually, so we modeled it off of like my inspirations were Calvin and Hobbes and XKCD.
Yeah.
And so I did it focused originally on like industrial, and it's been a larger topic. Where it came from is a little bit dicier, where the original book, so effectively, at my time at the National Security Agency, I was asked to go explain to another team how to do SCADA, so industrial offense. And I was completely against the topic. And it was this combatant command team, and they, no, Rob, you will come brief us on how to do SCADA offense stuff. And we are the SCADA offense team, and you're going to tell us what you know about these environments. I was like, okay. And so, I was like, salute sharp, move on. So I go down there and I prepare like a 2-hour briefing on if you're going to do this, don't do that. All right, here's how you get into that person's electric grid, like all these things. And at the end of the presentation, no questions the whole time. And at the end of the presentation, one guy raises his hand and goes, yeah, so what does SCADA stand for? And so I left and I wrote SCADA and Me, a book for children in management. And people actually liked it. And so we self-published on Amazon. And it sold like, I don't know, 20,000 copies or something around the world. It just went crazy. And I was having engineers call me and be like, I can explain to my son what I do now. And like this completely snarky, cynical like book ended up being this extremely like important thing to people. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe we should keep doing this. And so we just had our 205th week or something. And so every Sunday I publish it out. And then we published another one that was Threat Intelligence and Me, a book for children and analysts. And that one's a little less snarky and more educational.
The thing, I'm sure you get the fact that there is brilliance in it because there's so many topics that people just can't get their mind around. But by putting into that comical, whimsical way,
it helps. It very much helps educate people. I wrote an article for a bunch of congressional staffers explaining why backdoors and encryption and blockchain were all stupid. And like they didn't get it until I put it into like 6 comments, and they're like, "I totally get it now." I'm like, "All right, we're good."
You have a second career now.
Yeah, you go, yeah.
But do you think, in all sincerity, do you think by doing these comics, it's increased awareness to actually help you with what you're doing at Dragos?
I think it does. I like none of these things are ever like me teaching at Sands, me doing comics. Like none of the community stuff was ever like, "Oh, I'm going to build a company and it's going to be awesome." But what I find is everybody we interact with is like, oh, yeah, I see SCADA me on an engineer's desk or something at a company I go to. Or like I'll be at a conference like speaking of like, how many of you have taken one of my classes or like, seen Little Bobby? And like 60% of the people raise their hand. I'm like, well, crap, it's just a lot further and wider than I really would have expected it. And it's very humbling.
Has it influenced your marketing at Dragos?
No, I try to keep them separate. Like my marketing leader's like, can we use Little Bobby? I'm like, don't bastardize it. Please don't leverage
But has it influenced the way you think about marketing and telling your story to clients?
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Because I know no matter how much I think I'm not just drizzled in technical jargon, that I know even on the podcast when I'm trying to be, let me talk about risk. And it's massive technical jargon. And so I always remind myself by thinking about like, well, how would I put this in like a comic?
Yeah.
And that my board slides, like I really made board decks, and I had 5 slides in a comic, and it's been the best board deck ever for these other companies to understand.
I honestly, and I'm not like just trying to kiss your rear. When I was reading those, prepping for this, I was like, oh my God, this actually may influence. Maybe I'm not going to do Little Bobby, but just the way that it's described and the humor that's in it, it almost allows you to take any really complex topic and convey it to people who may not understand the underlying technical nature of it. So anyways, thanks. Okay, we're getting to the end. What's the best part about being the CEO of Dragos?
So there's internal and external, right?
Yep.
So internal, it's seeing people go do things they never thought they were able to do. Like to be able to be invited into a nuclear reactor, or to be invited into a manufacturer of a global food and beverage company. Those are crazy things. And to know that we've built something that if you're really doing intelligence or incident response work in this community, you will come through our doors at some point. That's just cool. Externally, it's the customers. And I know that's a very CEO answer, but you go to their sites and there's a buzz around security, and they're like, hey, we never had access to the plants before, but now we can communicate with our operations folks and deliver value. Like, oh man, and you kind of just feel that you're making life hard for the adversary. Like I want to know that there's some Russian, Iranian, whatever team that spends millions of dollars and years in training and develop a capability, and then they go up against one of our customers, and like some dude that's got a GED that he like worked hard and he didn't have like the luxuries of life, like, but he worked hard. He didn't have like a million certifications and a PhD, whatever. But he like got after it, and he sit in front of like our technology, goes, no, just stops it. Like that to me is going to be the amazing feeling of Russia's finest against Bubba, and Bubba destroys them, and I'm so excited.
Well, there's a
about
theme
that
of
thought.
like this empowering people that is kind of consistent throughout this entire conversation. What about the most challenging?
The most challenging is telling people no. Like you love them, you want to empower them with anything and everything, but standing as a gatekeeper, going, engineering team, I know you want 10 more head count. But if I look at the burn and I look at what we're doing and I make that choice for you today, it's going to impact on what we can do in 18 months from now. And I'm sorry, but you got to do the job with what you have for today. Let's talk about it, next quarter.
Yeah.
And standing in front of your team who you love and telling them that you can't empower them on something, it's a hard choice.
Yeah. So I started asking this next question, which I think is my favorite question. And so I'm really curious to hear your answer. So I'm going to tell you what the cliche question would be, and then I'm going to ask my real question. There's always that, hey, how do you define success? Which I hate.
Yeah.
But when you define success, what would you not include in your definition that most would?
What would I not include in my definition?
So
of
like
success?
one could argue like, money or whatever. But
yeah.
like when you think about success and how you define it, what would you not include?
Yeah, having so especially from a venture-backed company perspective, I don't think being the market winner is successful. So I hear every venture capitalist, every Gartner analyst, and I say that lovingly to Gartner, but we gotta pay the tax now. But I say that lovingly, where I see all these pundits come out and go, "Who's gonna be the winner of the industrial? Dragos is on the way to be the winner." And I actually think we're doing the community a disservice if we're the winner. I think there should be an ecosystem of players. And don't get me wrong. Yeah. I want to beat my competitors like crazy, right? Yep. I don't want to hear the lamentations of their sales engineers, right? Like, don't get me wrong. That being said, if it's just Dragos in 5-10 years in this space and what we're doing, then we haven't built the community. If we're truly educating and training other people, then there's going to be other companies nipping at our heels, and it's going to force us to be better. So I think being the winner in this space is not what I would define as success.
Wow. And would you extend that to you even personally? Meaning it sounds like what you're saying is it's just not about me. It's about the team, like you talked.
I think with the industrial community is at a place and a risk where the IT, security, and competence and businesses think that ICS is an add-on. Like, we can throw in a dissector for traffic analysis and some other product. Or, we can just give this to IT to deal with. And if you don't really defend the industrial space, there could be a future where people get hurt. This isn't about missing a patch and having a breach. This is about people dying. There was an attack in Saudi Arabia in a petrochemical facility where a state actor literally tried to kill people at that plant by removing safety functionality from the systems. This isn't the normal game.
Right.
And an industrial isn't a segment in the market. It is an industrial world. And I think if you're not careful of how you build that community, it could just slip into, we can handle that with our normal strategy. And people get hurt.
I'm keeping that question. That is one of the best answers, so thank you. Okay, last question, although it's two-part. The question is, what do you think are the most important attributes of a resilient leader? And you've seen a lot of, I would imagine, people that really demonstrate resilience. And then the second is there somebody that you would call it? It actually could be an organization. It could be whoever you want, but is there somebody you say, God, that person is resilient?
Yeah, I'm gonna be cliche on the second one, but on the first one, the first part of the question, I think, and it goes to resiliency, but I think anything that you're doing and you're doing well and it's worth doing is going to be lonely at some point, and I think it's going to be an incredibly difficult thing, and you just have to be ready to be knocked around. And I know that's a cliche kind of answer, but if you're going to be a resilient leader, you have to understand that you're going to piss off people in what you're doing. And you have to understand that the path you take isn't going to make everybody happy. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a path really worth taking and defining kind of a new success strategy. and at the end of the day, getting knocked around in that way could even, again, very cliche, but could even lose you friends and peers and people that you wanted to hang out with and be at the ending line with. And if you're going to really get after it, you have to just stick the course. And that, I think that's a harder thing to do than it is to obviously cliche kind of say. On the, like, who really inspires me and who do I think about, like, the super cliche answer is my dad. Like, I a Vietnam veteran, Desert Storm veteran, kind of like always took care of the family, was always there for us, always present. If I look in the business world, I don't know, it always changes, but I mean, there's various like characters that you don't know that you like Mark Cuban, these kind of guys that kind of just seem like this swagger aspect of it. I think you see political figures that you really like. I think everything politics these days pisses people off, but I always liked Condoleezza Rice and kind of like how she spoke to the American public. And I would just say that there's nobody that you could probably like idolize your entire career after. But when you see people that are kind of those silent leaders in their space that don't necessarily need the Twitter fame and everything else, like you want to be more like those people. Like I'll give you an example that necessarily I would never give him the card to be able to have me call him somebody I look up to, because he would harass me forever about it. But I'll give you an example. I come into this world of I'm protecting critical infrastructure. I'm doing cybersecurity against state actors. Like there's certain like, I'm not protecting a bank. I'm protecting the industrial world. There's certain like, So it's kind of hard to feel bad about what you're doing. My director of intelligence, Sergio, and his wife Sherry, they do all that, and then Sherry built a nonprofit where she does data analytics to identify human traffickers. And like last year alone, they freed like 1,000 women. And I'm like, damn it.
Like, you've won up me.
I thought like I had something. And not only are you protecting industrial, but you're freeing people in like modern slavery. And you're like, God, it's beautiful. And it's just absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
And so I think it's important to constantly have people that you feel are one-upping you. And that's fun.
What an awesome way to end it, Rob. Thank you. This has been great. Wow, that was incredible. Rob, thank you for your time. Thank you for visiting our offices. Thank you for educating me, educating the listeners, and likely educating a lot of our clients. I mean, this is something that if you have industrial control systems in your organization, you absolutely need to be getting ahead of. And I'll be honest with you, some of the things that you shared with us kind of scared the crap out of me, but that's a good thing. Because we need to be aware of these risks. And there are 3 key things that I'm taking away personally. The first is, like traditional cybersecurity, organizations that have operational technology have to act fast. If you're on a board or if you're an executive and you have operational technology, you better start talking to your CIO and your CISO to understand what plan they have in place. The second is, just because you are a cyber professional doesn't mean you have operational technology experience. So if you're a company looking to engage somebody, make sure that they've got the right experience. And then finally, and this is the half glass full, if you are out there, if you're going through college right now, or if you're looking to reinvent yourself, I would say look at a career in cyber. There are so many unbelievable opportunities, and there are so many opportunities out there. I know from personal experience that we can't hire cyber people fast enough, and now with this industrial control opportunity, it's even greater. Now, let me thank everybody that's out there. Listen, this podcast wouldn't exist if you guys didn't listen. So thank you very much for listening to Resilient, a Deloitte podcast produced by our friends at Rivet Radio. I love saying that, our friends at Rivet Radio, because, in fact, they do such an incredible job supporting us, producing it, everything. If you're interested in finding us, you can find us at Deloitte.com, or you can visit your favorite podcatcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and even Spotify, keyword Resilient. And check out some of our previous episodes. We have great interviews with CEOs, board members, and other leaders. If you liked my conversation with Rob, go back and check out my conversation with Jackie Rice, a good friend of mine. And she's got some leading edge perspectives on modernizing risk. And as you may recall, she was the first CRO at Target following their cyber breach. And if you are enjoying these conversations, do me a favor, give me a rating. That's all I'll say about that. And if you really want to provide any feedback, go to LinkedIn or Twitter. LinkedIn is just Michael Kearney. Last name's Kearney. On Twitter, mkearney33. I love recommendations for guests. I love hearing what you had to say about this episode. So visit me on social media. And now that we're done, I just want to pause and I just want to think about what Rob had to say. And I want you to make sure that you understand what your plan is that you have in place to protect your organization from these cyber threats in operational technology. And if you're not confident that you do, go figure it out quickly, because this is a significant risk.